Arlington Memorial Plaza buzzed with the familiar energy of Victory Day, its crystalline spires reflecting the late afternoon sun. Admiral Michael Hayes stood at the podium, his weathered hands gripping its edges as he gazed across the sea of faces before him. Veterans, their uniforms adorned with medals that caught the light, sat alongside civilians wearing the traditional white ribbons of remembrance. 50 years, half a century since humanity had driven back the Kraxan invasion, paying for their freedom with blood and sacrifice. Hayes felt the weight of his dress uniform's collar against his neck, the same uniform style his parents had worn when they died defending Chicago's last evacuation corridors. "We gather today," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "not just to remember our victory, but to honor." The holoscreens surrounding the plaza flickered. Hayes stopped mid-sentence, watching as the commemorative imagery of Earth's defense fleet dissolved into static. A murmur rippled through the crowd. In his 30 years of attending Victory Day ceremonies, there had never been a technical malfunction. The static cleared, revealing a face that made several veterans instinctively reach for weapons they no longer carried. The distinctive violet-scaled features of a Kraxan filled the screens, but something was wrong. The usual imperial majesty was gone, replaced by something Hayes had never seen in their species before: desperation. "People of Earth," the Kraxan Supreme Commander's translated voice boomed across the plaza. "I am Zarkax the Unyielding." He paused, mandibles twitching in what Hayes recognized as their species' expression of extreme distress. "Though perhaps today, I must be Zarkax the Humbled." Security forces were already moving through the crowd, but Hayes raised his hand, stopping them. He knew Zarkax by reputation. The commander had been a junior officer during the war, one of the few who had argued against the invasion of Earth. "Our empire faces extinction," Zarkax continued. "An enemy beyond our comprehension consumes our worlds. We have fought, adapted, deployed every weapon in our considerable arsenal. Nothing stops them. Nothing even slows them down." The transmission crackled, and for a moment, Hayes caught a glimpse of chaos in the background. Kraxan officers running, emergency lights flashing. The proud Kraxan Empire now does what we have never done in our 100,000 years of civilization. Zarkax's secondary eyes close, a gesture of ultimate submission in their culture. "We beg for aid. From you, humans, our former enemies, our greatest opponents." The plaza erupted in shouts and arguments. Hayes stood transfixed, watching the screens. He saw something in Zarkax's primary eyes, something that chilled him more than the words themselves. Raw, primal fear. "We have transmitted our scientific data on the threat," Zarkax continued. "Review it. You will see we speak truth. These entities, these void makers, they consume not just matter, but space itself. The transmission stuttered. "They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped by conventional means. But you humans," a desperate clicking sound emerged from his throat. "You were the only species to ever truly surprise us, to think in ways we could not predict. Perhaps that is what we need now." The transmission was deteriorating. Through the increasing static, Hayes caught glimpses of explosions, of something dark, moving against the stars visible through the command center's windows. "We offer everything. Our technology, our resources, our complete surrender if you demand it. But please, in the name of life itself, help us." The transmission cut out. For 3 heartbeats, the plaza remained absolutely silent. Then pandemonium erupted. Hayes stood at the podium, his mind racing. He thought of Chicago in flames, of his parents' last transmission, of everything humanity had lost in the war. But he also thought of something his mother used to say: "The true test of humanity isn't how we treat our friends, but how we treat those who've wronged us when they're in need." His hand reached for his neural link, just as the first priority alerts began flooding in from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. The void between stars was growing larger, and whatever had brought the mighty Kraxan Empire to its knees was heading their way. The choice they would make today would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The United Nations emergency session resembled a powder keg seeking the spark. Admiral Hayes stood before the assembled representatives, his dress uniform replaced by standard blues, watching as the Kraxan data played across the chamber's main display. The three-dimensional projection showed entire star systems vanishing into absolute darkness. "The data is authenticated," he announced, his voice cutting through the tense murmurs. 3 more Kraxan systems have gone dark in the past 6 hours. Their colonial world of Vexthor, population 9 billion, simply ceased to exist. "Good." The shout came from the Chinese representative, Ambassador Liu, who bore a prominent scar from the Battle of Shanghai. "Let them suffer as we suffered. Let them." "That's enough." Hayes's quiet interruption carried more weight than Liu's outburst. He activated his neural link, projecting a new simulation above the assembly. "This is the projected path of the Voidmakers after they finish with Kraxan space. Notice anything?" The room fell silent as red lines traced across the galactic map, showing possible trajectories. Every single one intersected with human space. "We have 3 choices," Hayes continued, pacing slowly across the platform. "We can watch the Kraxan die and wait for our turn. We can try to fight these things alone when they reach us. Or," he paused, letting the weight of the moment settle, "we can fight them now, together, with the combined strength of both our civilizations." "You of all people," Ambassador Rodriguez of Mars Colony stood, pointing an accusing finger, "should want vengeance. Your parents." "My parents died protecting civilians." Hayes cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. "Human civilians, yes, but they died protecting the innocent from annihilation. Tell me, how are we any better than the old Kraxan Empire if we stand by and watch billions die?" The chamber erupted into chaos. Hayes waited, letting them argue, watching the simulation continue its relentless prediction of doom. His neural link pinged. Another Kraxan system had just gone silent. The Kraxan were wrong. His voice boomed through the chamber, silencing the debate. They were wrong to attack us, wrong to believe might made right, wrong to think conquest was their destiny. But look at their transmission again. He played Zarkax's message, focusing on the Supreme Commander's submission gesture. In their entire history, the Kraxan have never begged, never admitted weakness, never asked for help. Until now. This isn't just a cry for aid. It's the death of their old ideology. They're abandoning everything they believed in because they found something more important than pride. Survival. A new alert flashed across his neural link. Hayes closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the classified intelligence. When he opened them, his decision was made. "I've just received confirmation from our deep space outposts. The void between stars is expanding. These Voidmakers aren't just consuming worlds. They are unraveling the fabric of space itself. We're not just facing extinction. We're facing the end of existence as we know it." He straightened, squaring his shoulders, the way his father had taught him as a boy. "I lost my parents to Kraxan weapons. I watched Chicago burn. I carried the scars of their war for 50 years. And I am standing here, telling you that none of that matters now. We can die separately as enemies, clutching our grudges as the universe goes dark around us, or we can live together as allies." The chamber had grown so quiet he could hear the hum of the holographic projectors. In that silence, Hayes played his final card. "My parents believed humanity was worth saving. That's why they gave their lives. Now we have to decide. Are we the humanity they died protecting? Or are we something less?" The vote that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. As representatives filed out to prepare their nations for what was to come, Hayes remained at the podium, watching the simulation play out. His neural link was already compiling lists of ships, crews, and resources. They would need everything they could muster. Humanity had just agreed to save their greatest enemies. Now they just had to figure out how. The U.S. Forgiveness hung in high Earth orbit like a sword pointed at the stars. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge, watching as the last of the task force ships took formation. 47 vessels, the fastest assembly of a battle fleet in human history. Some still had civilian paint showing through their hasty military conversions. Final ship reporting in position. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez announced from the tactical station. Task Force Redemption is ready for departure. Hayes nodded, studying the fleet's formation on the main display. Some of the ship names reflected their rushed commission. Mercy, Second Chance, Rising Dawn. Others bore harder edges. Vengeance's End, Never Again, Remember Earth. A fleet caught between humanity's capacity for forgiveness and its memory of pain. Sir, Rodriguez's voice dropped lower. We've received confirmation about Lieutenant Chen. Hayes turned, already knowing what was coming. Tell me. Facial recognition confirms it. She's Catherine Chen Vakath, daughter of Admiral Chen, and a Kraxan war chief, born after the peace, when some veterans tried to bridge the divide. Rodriguez's hand instinctively touched the metal on his chest. His father had died fighting Chen's Kraxan parent. She passed all our screenings. Her record is spotless. But now the crew knows. Hayes finished. The revelation of a half-Kraxan officer serving aboard their flagship couldn't have come at a worse time. Before Hayes could respond, the ship's sensors blared. Multiple hyperspace translations. The sensor officer called out. 7 vessels emerging. Configurations match Kraxan scout ships. The bridge crew tensed. Weapons officers' hands hovered over their stations. 50 years of conditioning didn't fade easily. The lead Kraxan vessel transmitted. Task Force Redemption. This is Scout Leader Texkar. We are your assigned guides through the quantum currents to Kraxan space. Be advised. There was a pause. We have lost contact with 3 more systems during your fleet's assembly. Hayes made his decision. Lieutenant Chen, take the comm. You're our liaison with the Kraxan scouts. The bridge fell silent as Catherine Chen Vakath stood. Her features were mostly human, but there was no mistaking the slight violet tint to her skin, the subtle ridge patterns on her neck. She moved to the communication station with military precision. Scout Leader Texkar, this is Lieutenant Chen Vakath. Task Force Redemption acknowledges. We are ready to proceed. The silence from the Kraxan ships lasted 2 seconds longer than protocol allowed. When Texkar responded, his translated voice carried an emotion Hayes had never heard in a Kraxan. Wonder. Lieutenant, it is an honor. Your existence gives hope to both our peoples. Please, coordinate with my navigation officer for the jump calculations. As Chen Vakath worked, Hayes addressed his fleet. Task Force Redemption, this is Admiral Hayes. In moments, we'll make our first jump toward Kraxan space. Some of you think we're on a fool's errand. Others believe we're walking into a trap. He paused, watching Chen Vakath efficiently coordinating with the Kraxan vessels. Look around your bridges, your engine rooms, your fighter bays. Look at your crewmates. We carry with us the best of humanity. Our diversity, our adaptability, our capacity to grow beyond old hatreds. The void between stars is growing larger, but today we prove that the space between enemies can grow smaller. The hyperspace calculations came in. Hayes gave the order, and Task Force Redemption made its first jump. As the fleet emerged, a collective gasp spread across every bridge. The stars were wrong. Where navigational charts showed 12 stars in the local cluster, only 7 remained. The void between them was visibly larger, an unnatural darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Sir, Chen Vakath's voice was steady despite the horror on the main screen. Kraxan scouts are reporting movement in the void. Something is watching us. Hayes stared into the artificial darkness between the stars. Humanity's first journey to save their greatest enemies had begun. He could only hope they weren't already too late. The Kraxan refugee fleet materialized from hyperspace like wounded predators, once mighty warships now scared and struggling. But it wasn't the battle damage that made Hayes' breath catch. It was the civilian ships tucked between the warriors' protective formation. Thousands of them, from luxury cruisers to mining vessels, all crammed with survivors. Multiple distress signals. Chen Vakath reported, her hands dancing across the comm station. The refugee fleet is reporting. Sir, they're reporting pursuit. Something followed them through their last jump. Before Hayes could respond, space itself seemed to tear. A hole of perfect darkness ripped open at the edge of the system, larger than any ships in either fleet. As they watched, stars behind the anomaly simply winked out. All ships, battle formations. Hayes commanded. Krexan vessels, fall back behind our line. Lieutenant Chen Vakath, tell them to start evacuating their civilian ships now. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Through it all, Hayes watched the void growing larger. Something moved within that impossible darkness, shapes that hurt his eyes to look at, geometries that shouldn't exist in normal space. Sir, Rodriguez called out, the Krexan command ship is refusing to retreat. They're saying they won't hide behind human shields. Hayes grabbed the direct comm. Krexan command, this is Admiral Hayes. Your pride is noted and respected, but those civilian ships need your escorts more than we need your guns. Fall back. That's not a request. A pause, then a translated voice. Human wisdom received. Admiral, we thank you. The Void Makers emerged fully into normal space. Massive crystalline structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where they passed, reality itself grew thin, stars becoming dim and distant. All ships, open fire, Hayes ordered. Focus on the lid construct. Human and Krexan weapons fire lanced out. Plasma torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and gravity bombs, enough firepower to level a continent. The Void Makers absorbed it all without slowing. No effect. Rodriguez reported. They're advancing on the civilian fleet. Hayes watched as one of the crystal ships approached a laden Krexan transport. The transport tried to turn, engines flaring desperately, but it was too slow. Darkness enveloped it, and when it cleared, there was nothing left. No debris, no energy signature, just absence. U.S. Mercy, Hayes commanded, move to shield those transports. Vengeance's end, never again. Form up on their flanks. All hands, prepare for close quarters engagement. The human ships moved into position as more Void Makers emerge. On the main screen, Hayes watched a Krexan medical ship struggling with failed engines. Children's faces pressed against its viewports, their violet scales pale with terror. Sir, Chen Vakath's voice cracked. I'm receiving. They're broadcasting their children's names. It's a Krexan death ritual. There. Like hell they are, Hayes growled. Helm, take us in. Point-blank range on that construct. Divert all power to forward shields. The U.S. Forgiveness plunged between the medical ship and the approaching Void Maker. Impact alarms screamed as darkness washed over their shields. Warning lights flooded the bridge red. Shields failing, Rodriguez shouted. 10 seconds to total collapse. Hayes watched the medical ship limping away, already being taken under tow by the U.S. Mercy. On their short-range cameras, he could see the Krexan children now pressing their hands against the glass in a gesture of gratitude. Sir, Chen Vakath called out. Message from the Krexan command ship. They're asking permission to send their doctors to our medical base. They want to help treat our wounded. The shield warnings reached fever pitch. Hayes allowed himself a grim smile. Permission granted. Tell them this is what allies do. The U.S. Forgiveness's shields held, barely. As they withdrew to regroup, Hayes watched Krexan medical shuttles flying toward human ships, while human engineers raced to repair Krexan vessels. On the common emergency channel, he heard human and Krexan voices coordinating, working together, united against the darkness threatening them all. They had done more than save lives today. They had begun to heal a 50-year wound. Deep in what was once Kraxan space, the U.S. Forgiveness drifted through the graveyard of a civilization. Surrounding them, the mighty rings of the Kraxan throne world Vexkar hung broken, their quantum diamond structures reduced to dull, lifeless stone. Analysis complete, Admiral. Chief Scientist Dr. Marcus Rivera announced, his hologram flickering above the bridge's central display. The Voidmakers aren't just consuming matter. They're converting it into dark energy. Each system they destroy increases the expansion rate of their artificial void. Hayes watched fragments of the rings tumble past. Purpose. We found it in their code structure, Rivera continued. They're ancient machines, built by a civilization that died millions of years ago. Their purpose was to harvest energy for their creator's final weapon. When that civilization vanished, the machines kept going, following their base programming. Convert all matter to dark energy, feed the void. A proximity alert blared. Voidmaker scout ship, Rodriguez called out. It's breached our outer hull, Deck 7. All hands, combat stations, Hayes ordered. Security teams. Sir, Chen Vakath interrupted. Kraxan warriors are requesting permission to join our Marines in repelling the intruder. They say their combat doctrine might complement our tactics. Hayes nodded. Granted. Tell them to follow our Marines' lead. Through the ship's internal cameras, Hayes watched as human Marines and Kraxan warriors converged on Deck 7. The Voidmaker had taken physical form, a crystalline, spider-like construct that moved with terrible precision, each step calculated to maximum efficiency. Teams in position, Rodriguez reported. There, sir, the Kraxan are confused. Our Marines aren't following standard combat protocols. Hayes allowed himself a small smile. No, they wouldn't be. On screen, the Marines were behaving chaotically, some charging straight at the construct, others throwing pieces of debris to create distractions, two even using their magnetic boots to run on the ceiling. The Voidmaker paused, its crystalline form vibrating, as it tried to calculate responses to these illogical actions. Now, the Marine commander's voice crackled over the comm. Pattern Sierra 7. There was no pattern Sierra 7. Every Marine moved randomly, but their chaos had purpose. The Voidmaker's predictive algorithms failed completely, unable to compute responses to actions that defy tactical logic. The Kraxan warriors, seeing the strategy, adapted instantly. They abandoned their rigid combat formations and embraced chaos, their natural strength and speed now guided by unpredictability. Together, the combined force overwhelmed the construct. Sir, Rivera's hologram flickered excitedly. We're getting readings from the destroyed scout. The Voidmakers operate on pure logic. Their entire existence is based on mathematical precision. They literally cannot process or predict genuine randomness. That's why they avoided Earth during the Kraxan War, Chen Vakath breathed. Our scans showed them passing near Sol system, but they never attacked. Human unpredictability must have confused their targeting systems. Hayes stood, watching as Marines and Kraxan warriors helped each other up, some even attempting each other's victory gestures. Get me a channel to both fleets. Once connected, he spoke clearly. What we witnessed today wasn't just a successful defense. We found our enemy's weakness. The Kraxan Empire's strength has always been their precision, their tactical perfection. Humanity's advantage has always been our chaos, our ability to defy prediction. Apart, each of these traits is powerful. Together, he let the thought hang as cheers erupted across both human and Kraxan frequencies. On his private channel, a message from the Kraxan Supreme Commander appeared. Perhaps, Admiral Hayes, this is why the universe guided our species to meet, not as conqueror and conquered, but as necessary halves of a greater whole. Hayes watched the combined warriors on Deck 7 beginning to teach each other their techniques. Humanity's chaos and the Kraxan's precision were merging into something new, something neither species could have achieved alone. Beyond the ship's hull, the void between stars grew larger. But for the first time since this crisis began, Hayes felt something else growing stronger: hope. The asteroid field surrounding the remnants of Kraxan colony Vexthar provided temporary shelter for the battered fleets. Through the U.S. Forgiveness's observation deck, Hayes watched teams of human and Kraxan engineers conducting emergency repairs, their EVA suits moving in an odd ballet against the star-scattered backdrop. Supreme Commander Zarkax requests your presence in the Cultural Exchange Chamber, sir, Chen Vakath reported. He says it's urgent. Hayes found Zarkax in the hastily converted cargo bay, surrounded by holographic projections of both human and Kraxan artistic achievements. The massive Kraxan commander stood before a projection of Earth's Beethoven, conducting his Ninth Symphony. Your species creates beauty from chaos, Zarkax said without turning. We never understood this. Our music is mathematical, precise. But this, he gestured at the symphony. This is ordered disorder, controlled passion. Hayes noticed something odd on a nearby table, a Kraxan war drum beside a human violin. Your people have their own forms of artistic expression, Commander. Please, Zarkax turned, performing the gesture of informal equals. After what your ships did to save our children, call me Zarkax. He moved to the war drum. Our ancestors used these to coordinate attacks. Pure rhythm, no variation. But today, one of your crew members showed us how to play it differently. He demonstrated, his four-fingered hands creating a complex pattern that mixed Kraxan precision with human-inspired improvisation. Hayes found himself nodding to the beat. The moment shattered as proximity alarms screamed. Multiple Voidmaker signatures. Rodriguez's voice blared over the comm. They're using the asteroids for cover. Hayes and Zarkax rushed to the bridge, the Kraxan commander insisting on staying rather than returning to his ship. On the main display, crystalline forms emerged from behind the asteroids, their geometric patterns more complex than any they'd encountered before. They're learning, Zarkax growled, adapting their formations to counter our combined tactics. Sir, Chen Vakath called out. The U.S. Defiant is caught in a gravity well. Their engines are failing. The Voidmaker's air. Kraxan battle cruiser moving to assist. Rodriguez interrupted. Sir, it's Captain Vexter's ship. The one that lost half its crew saving our medical frigate last week. They watched as the Kraxan vessel moved to shield the Defiant, its advanced armor absorbing the void effects. But a second Voidmaker emerged behind them, trapping both ships. Ensign Sarah Cooper requesting permission to launch. The young fighter pilot's voice crackled through the comm. I can get between them, create a disruption field. Negative. Both Hayes and Zarkax shouted simultaneously, but Cooper had already launched. Her fighter, barely larger than a shuttle, dove between the trapped ships and the Voidmakers. She activated her experimental quantum disruptor, a weapon that could buy seconds at the cost of the pilot's life. For both our peoples, Cooper's final transmission cut off as her fighter exploded, but the disruption field worked. Both ships escaped. The bridge fell silent. Hayes watched Zarkax perform the Kraxan ritual for honoring fallen warriors, his violet scales reflecting the emergency lights. Her sacrifice, Zarkax said quietly, will be sung in Kraxan halls for generations. The battle raged on, but something had changed. Human ships adapted Kraxan precision maneuvers while adding their own chaotic elements. Kraxan vessels began employing unpredictable tactics that confused the Voidmaker's targeting systems. In the midst of the chaos, Hayes noticed something extraordinary. The human crews were attempting to pronounce Kraxan battle prayers, while Kraxan warriors shouted human phrases like Semper Fi and Never Give Up. Sir, Chen Vakath reported, tears in her eyes. All ships are coordinating through a shared battle song. Human musical patterns, Kraxan war rhythms. They're fighting as one. As the fleets drove back the Voidmaker assault, Hayes and Zarkax stood together on the bridge of humanity's flagship, watching their peoples unite not just in combat, but in spirit. "We were wrong about your species," Zarkax said softly. "We thought chaos was weakness. Now we understand. It is the chaos within your order that makes you strong." The manufactured black hole loomed before the combined fleet like a portal to oblivion. Within its twisted event horizon, the geometric patterns of the Voidmaker's central nexus pulsed with impossible light. "Quantum scans confirm," Chen Vakath reported, her voice tight. "The nexus is converting entire star systems into dark energy, feeding it directly into something at the center." Hayes studied the tactical display, where human and Kraxan ships held formation around the U.S. Forgiveness. They'd lost 37 vessels getting here, each sacrifice burning a hole in his heart. "The shutdown codes aren't working." Dr. Rivera's hologram flickered with interference from the black hole's radiation. "They've evolved beyond their original programming. The only way to reach their core consciousness is from inside." Zarkax, who hadn't left the Forgiveness since their cultural exchange, clicked his mandibles in frustration. "A suicide mission?" "No," Hayes straightened, an impossible idea forming. "A human mission." The bridge fell silent. Hayes activated the main display, showing his plan. "The Voidmakers can't predict human behavior. Their defenses are designed to stop logical approaches, so we do the most illogical thing possible. We wake up their creators." "Admiral," Rodriguez protested, "the civilization that built them has been dead for millions of years. Their consciousness is still there." Hayes pointed to energy readings at the Nexus core. "The Voidmakers aren't just gathering energy. They're storing it in a quantum matrix designed to hold their creators' minds until the universe could be reformed to their liking. They're not weapons. They're a resurrection machine." Chen Vakath's eyes widened. "The Ancient Ones wanted to remake reality itself. They're destroying our universe to build their new one." "Precisely." Hayes turned to Zarkax. "We need your quantum engineer's precision to reach the core, but we need human chaos to break through their defenses. A combined team." "No combined team," Zarkax interrupted. "I will go with you alone, Admiral Hayes. If we fail, both our peoples need their remaining leaders to guide them." Hayes nodded, understanding the honor being offered. "Lieutenant Chen Vakath, you have the con. If we're not back in 20 minutes, take the fleet and retreat to Earth. Save who you can." The journey to the Nexus core was a nightmare of twisted physics and reality-bending geometry. The small quantum runner carrying Hayes and Zarkax wove through crystalline structures that hurt the mind to look at directly. Kraxan precision got them through the outer defenses, while human unpredictability confused the inner ones. They found the ancient consciousness chamber at the heart of it all. A vast spherical space filled with swirling quantum data, the stored minds of a civilization that had chosen to end reality itself rather than accept its own extinction. "By the first egg," Zarkax breathed, using a Kraxan expression of awe. "They're all here. Trillions of minds." Hayes rushed to the control interface, but the symbols were incomprehensible. "We can't shut it down. The process is too far gone." He turned to Zarkax. "But we can wake them up. Make them see what they're destroying." The ancient interface responded to their combined touch, human intuition, and Kraxan precision working in harmony. The quantum matrix stirred. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in a language dead for millions of years, but somehow translating itself in their minds. "Why do you disturb our great work?" The voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. "Reality must be reformed. Perfected." "Look at us," Hayes demanded. "Look at what your great work would destroy. Two species that were enemies, now standing together. Life adapting, growing, becoming more than the sum of its parts." Zarkax stepped forward. "Your perfect universe would be static, unchanging. But life, true life, is chaos and order dancing together. It is beauty born from imperfection." The ancient consciousness stirred, trillions of minds processing what they witnessed. "You are not what we expected to evolve after us. You are more." "Then help us," Hayes pleaded. There's room enough in reality for both order and chaos, old and new. Help us stop this. The answer, when it came, would change everything. We offer you a choice. One species must sacrifice their home system, the ancient consciousness pronounced. The energy release would stabilize reality. But the cost? The quantum matrix swirled with ghostly patterns. Choose. Hayes felt the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. But before he could speak, Zarkax stepped forward. We volunteer the Kraxan home system. His mandibles quivered with emotion. We began this journey as conquerors. Let us end it as saviors. No. Hayes grabbed his alien friend's arm. There has to be another way. All this technology, the ability to store entire civilizations in quantum matrices. His eyes widened. The dimensional drive. The experimental technology on the forgiveness. Zarkax clicked in confusion. It's untested, unstable. Exactly. Hayes turned to the ancient consciousness. You sought to destroy this reality to build a perfect one. But what if you could have both? We can use our drive to shunt the Void Makers into a parallel dimension. One where you could build your perfect universe without destroying ours. The quantum matrix pulsed with increased activity. Impossible. The energy requirements would be met by your own harvested dark energy. Hayes finished. You get your new reality. We keep ours. Everyone lives. The consciousness stirred, trillions of minds processing the concept. Your solution is chaotic, unpredictable. It defies logical progression. A pause. It is perfect. The next few hours were a blur of desperate activity. The combined fleet coordinated with precise chaos, human ingenuity merging with Kraxan technology. Chenvakath's voice guided ships through maneuvers that would have been impossible weeks ago, while Rodriguez calculated firing solutions that made the Ancient One's mathematics look primitive. The dimensional drive powered up, its experimental energies merging with the dark energy the Void Makers had harvested. Reality itself groaned under the strain. Dimensional breach in 3. Hayes watched as humanity's future hung in the balance. 2. He felt Zarkax's hand on his shoulder, 4 fingers gripping in solidarity. 1. The universe cracked. When the light faded and sensors came back online, the void between stars had stopped growing. The Void Makers were gone, along with their creators, transferred to a new reality where they could build their perfect universe without destroying this one. But the cost was steep. The dimensional energies had fractured spacetime throughout both human and Kraxan territory. Entire sectors of space had become uninhabitable, while others had merged in ways that defied physics. Admiral, Chenvakath's voice shook with emotion. Preliminary reports indicate that 40% of both our territories are now uninhabitable. The remaining regions, sir, they've somehow merged. We can't separate them without destroying both. Hayes looked at Zarkax, seeing his own realization mirrored in those alien eyes. Their species would have to share what remained of their worlds. The segregation that had defined their post-war existence was no longer possible. 3 centuries later, a young girl stood in Unity Park on New Earth, her skin a subtle violet hue, her eyes fully human. She watched as her classmates, human, Kraxan, and the new hybrid generations, played beneath the great statue. The monument showed 2 figures, Admiral Michael Hayes and Supreme Commander Zarkax, their hands clasped in friendship, their faces turned toward the stars. At its base, words in both human and Kraxan script read, "From the ashes of hatred, we forged a future neither species could imagine alone." The girl's teacher, herself a descendant of Lieutenant Chenvakath, gathered the children. "Today's history lesson is about the Void War," she announced. "But more importantly, it's about how an act of mercy changed the course of 2 civilizations." As she began the tale, the children settled in the grass, their differences forgotten in the shade of the monument. Above them, the merged stars of human and Kraxan space twinkled in the daylight, a constant reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from learning to call them friends. In the distance, a Kraxan war drum played in concert with a human orchestra, their combined music echoing across the plains of a world that belonged to both species, and neither and all of them at once. The universe, as it turned out, had room enough for chaos and order, for precision and unpredictability, for the beauty that could only be born when former enemies chose to save each other.